all about. So just an introduction for me, because we're streaming live on our partner, PBCJ, Public Broadcasting Corporation of Jamaica. And so just to let you know, I am an approved financial counselor with the Office of the Supervisor of Insolvency, a financial success coach, CEO of this channel that I know you subscribe to, and as I said, president of CCRA, the Caribbean Credit Repair Association. And, you know, again, for those who have subscribed to my channel, you know that my journey with my children and my family has really inspired me to be a better investor and share that knowledge. You know, my second son had, you know, heart condition and all kinds of things that led to my own journey with debt and credit. And in coming out of that situation, it helped me to appreciate that we need to have credit restoration professionals that can assist persons with their own debt journey. And so that's where the debt healing and credit restoration part of the business came up, where we really believe in bringing dignity to personal debt management. So we're so excited that we have bankers and big business people who also believe that there should be dignity to debt management. And coming up next month, because you know we're not just going to stop here, we have a virtual summit, and we're going to have a lot of great speakers who will give even more guidance, more detail on how we can look at credit restoration and consumer debt solutions, because we want to stay ahead of the curve. And so again, if you didn't you hear me, I say subscribe, like, share this channel. And Financially Focused is a founding member of CCRA, and we're going to be rolling out membership pretty soon. Office of the Supervisor of Insolvency, just to let, for those who don't know, insolvency is the sort of kinder word for bankruptcy. And so if your financial situation calls for it, there is an office that provides support, and that they will work out the debt issues with your creditors in a dignified fashion. And let me tell you, historically, we're coming from far, because a lot of persons who were in bankruptcy went to prison. But now we're in an era where there's dignity in debt management. And so many of us are carrying a debt burden. But guess what? In this era, we're also cognizant of debt errors, identity theft. And a lot of times you may be carrying burdens that are not yours. And so that's why credit restoration is a critical professional set, because they're going to make sure their clients are not carrying debt or burdens that don't belong to them. So we said it. Next, crisis, consumer debt. We believe professionals are needed to help consumers. We believe COVID-19 caused economic upheaval, and certified training is key. And so again, we have in our waiting room some awesome professionals and serious experts that's going to help us. But just to set the foundation, when you have a debt issue, who helps you? Who helps you? Remember, the bailiff, they're just there to collect. So they're not even going to allow you to rebuild so that you can get new funding to go forward. That's not their job. Okay, same thing with the lawyers. They come in when court action. Again, they're not focused on you rebuilding. And even the bankers and financial institutions, they're focused on new loans. Their job is not to give debt counseling. And that's why debt counselors as a profession is so needed. Here are a host of debt relief options. And that's what debt counselors take you through. And they help you to work out which one of these pathways is going to give you the support you need. So again, we advocate credit restoration professionals. And so get ready for July. And to give you a taster, we have our very first speaker up. And this is the most fantastic president of First Global Bank, President Mariame. Robinson. Welcome. How are you,
Very,
President?
very good, President. Good to see you.
Yes,
Thanks for
thank
having me
you.
on your show. Good to be
Yes.
here.
So, Mrs. Robinson, we really, we believe that, yes, sometimes some unfortunate decisions cause you to have debt challenges, but we're really about charting a way forward in dignity. So tell me, your view, because, you have the eagle's eye view as a banker.
Right. So thank you for having me. So first of all, I just want to acknowledge that we are living through unprecedented times. I'm sure people have heard this said time and time again, but with crisis comes opportunity. And I think it would be strange for any of us to say that the impact of this pandemic has not left us changed pre-pandemic
Right.
to now. And what I find is that when you think about the characteristics of what has happened here, we have three crises happening at once. We have a health
Okay.
crisis, which is what
Yes.
precipitated this, which then led to an economic crisis because of the way in which we've had to address or stem the health crisis, which is lockdown, contraction, restriction of movement, right? Which means restriction of earning income, things we take for granted. And then
Yes.
that has then led to one of the things I'm most passionate about and what worries me the most is the social crisis, what's happening to our women and our children and just people who are most economically disadvantaged. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so given this crisis, it's such a great reminder for us to think about what is the most important things to us, who are most important to us, what's our purpose here on life, on earth, sorry. And I really like the way you framed it around debt healing. In fact, I haven't heard that before. I'm like, I'm going to take that back to the bank and use it with our customers because debt is to some extent a way of life, and you have good debt and you have
Yes.
bad debt, right?
Yes.
And what you'll hear people talk about and counsel persons about is good debt are things that allow you to purchase assets that will appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
Because on a rainy day, you can use that asset to secure additional financing later on in life, or you can sell that asset; it would have appreciated or gained value, or you could, again, just utilize the asset for what it might be in terms of generating income, present income. So that's good debt. So buying a house would be good debt. Buying
Yes.
a car, not as good. We don't mind car loans. Our bank processes quite a few, as does the industry, and there is a purpose to a car. But again, car loans, investing in your education or upskilling so that you can earn
Yes.
more income, those are all good practices in terms of taking on additional debt.
But you use the word purpose, and I like that because
Yes,
in our practice of debt healing, the language you use is so critical.
important. So
And
important.
a lot of persons will say, "Well, I borrowed the money. I don't know what I did with it."
Right.
So again, you use those language that is not empowering. So I love that you used purpose.
Purpose. Yes. And so let's say you're now in a debt crisis. I want to go straight to the jugular, right? So
Yes.
you've been kind of, investing or in yourself or in an asset. The pandemic hit. We've gone into restriction or restricted movement or contracted way of living. And now income has fallen off, which is
Right.
really, and once your income falls off, whether you are an individual or an owner of an SME, and you've taken on debt, and some have taken it, pushed it to the limit, then you will run
Right.
into some issues. And I just want to say to
Yes.
everybody, this is more prevalent than you think.
Mm.
The most brilliant, the most economically advantaged, if you will, persons will at some point, especially depending on your personality, will run into situations where they may be over leveraged, we call it, when you have too much debt, such that if a crisis hits, you don't really have that cushion. So here's what we suggest, and I'll take it from an individual standpoint, and I'm happy to go into more details on the SME side if you'd like. But the
Yes.
first thing you do, apart from just having the right mindset, because this is very spiritual, the
Mm-hmm.
first thing you do is we need to take an assessment of the situation. You need to
Right.
take a step back and figure out what are your finances today. And this is
Yes.
where, you could call it doing a budget, you could call it just, doing cash flows, and you don't need to be a math genius to do it. Most people say, gosh, I can't do cash flows. I want to get a piece of paper and start with the outflows, your expenses, the things that you need to live day to day. and you just write out what your monthly expense would be. And then after that, you then say, what are my income? What am I earning? And that could be savings, which generates X% a month, but you just want to be clear about all sources of income. And that gap will help you to really define how much in the hole are you, whether it really is a gap or it's a much smaller cushion. So the first thing is to really understand the extent of your needs when it comes to living your life. And in there, you probably have income from debt. You may have debt which you have to repay as an expense, that cash outflow that I was talking about. So the next thing then is, and I always say this to persons, do not be afraid to reach out to your banker. In fact, a fun tip, which I use the opportunity to share as much whenever I can, you should be reaching out to your banker either monthly or every quarter. 4 times a year, you just call up the person who gave you a loan. Yes, that is your banker. So even if they're not calling you or building a relationship with you as they should, but even if they're not, you are important to those financial institutions. Don't think your money is too small. Call them up and just say, here's how I'm doing. This is what's going on in my life. The business or whatever the asset is continues to do well. That's it. And come off the phone. That way, when a crisis hits, whether it's pandemic or not pandemic, and you need something, the bank understands you, understands your goals, and it's so much easier for the bank to get that loan through the system because you have a champion, that's moving your loan through the system. But that champion is so much more credible when they can say they've consistently built a pattern and gotten to know you really well. So it's to reach out to your lender. Hopefully it's a bank, I'm just kidding, but a lender, and just your current lender, and just be clear about your situation. If you can go to the lender and say, these are my outflows, cash outflows, the expenses, and talk about cash, and this is my income, and this is what the future looks like. So let's say you lost a job. My income will be challenged for the next 2 years, but here's what I'm doing about it. Here are my qualifications. Here are the jobs I'm thinking of getting. This is what the income could be. And get that banker to tell you what is possible. And most bankers are incredibly helpful, but don't hear things like, boy, this is not good. Let me see what we can do. That can sound very heavy and burdensome. The truth is, most of us want to partner and want to help, to try and help you get through this time. So I think that's incredibly important. And then as you talk to your banker, there are different things you can do. You can consolidate your facilities, right? So you can, if you have multiple facilities, move it into one, reduce your interest rate. So you negotiate with us to do structuring, whether we either...
I like that word, negotiate.
Yes, there you go. There you go, Dennise. Negotiation is very important. And as much as the financial institution looks like this entity, it's in their best interest to put something on the table that you can afford.
Right.
We don't want the debt to go bad, and we don't want you to mentally or just socially or whatever feel down about the situation that you're in.
And what's critical, your topic was looking at short-term, long-term, solutions, and you've given us some gems. So first, purpose, so remember that when we look at debt in a way that we bring in dignity, we look at our language, so we look at purpose. You even look at negotiation, which is, again, languaging, right? And for persons to look at us as humans.
Right.
And another word you brought up, which I really appreciate within the context of debt, which I've not heard before, your banker as your champion. I like that. Tell me more about that, even with, long-term being like mortgages, short-term education loans. But in that context, how do you make your banker your champion? I've never heard of that.
No, right. Okay, so on the longer term side, so the banker, the first thing is to build a relationship and to not think that you're not important enough to the bank to build a relationship. The second thing is to know what banks require when you're taking out a loan. One of the things I've always told everybody and realized when I came into the industry in this manner is that you should be able to get a loan once you start the process. Meaning, once you know what the banks require and you give them the information, right, you should be approved. And so what banks are looking for are really two things in particular. Mm-hmm. One is they want to know what is the cash flow situation for you, the individual, or you, the SME. right? And from a cash flow situation, that they'll ask for projections, or they may ask for what your last set of statements will be, so historical and a go forward basis, because they're trying to build a picture of your ability to afford repaying the loan. The second thing the bank asks for is security, right?
Yes.
And so from a security standpoint, they're going to ask you for, it may be a house, it may be some other asset, maybe a car, it may be furniture. I'm just kidding. But the security is all, in order for the bank to take the security, they need to know the value of the security. So if it's something that's well defined and typical or common as a house, you would get the valuation done. If it's something more unique, you can discuss with the bank how to appropriate or allocate value to that security. And we have specific types of securities that we use. So for example, shares in a company, we will take the value of that shares and it will apply a haircut to call it the true value, because if we need to offload those shares, it will take some time. So those are the two things that banks require. And so you should just know what it is the bank will require as you go in and get the financing. If you are a SME, for example, now, and you're thinking more long term. Oh, sorry. One other thing I wanted to, well, I'll talk about it under the context of the SME, because it's the same point. They're short term fixes, which we just spoke about, but the longer term strategies is really about how do you constantly make your business more efficient.
Yes.
Right? So you look for ways in which you spend money as a business.
Yes.
And figure out, are there ways to do it better? And please engage your full staff. So you have a staff of 5 or a staff of 200. The persons across the different levels of your organization have ideas about how you can do things differently and more cost effectively to get to the same outcome. We've done that to our company, and the things that come up are just tremendous. The other thing is this whole thing around pivoting to digital and digitization. It sounds exciting, digital, right? Especially when we're on the restricted movement.
Yes, lockdown.
But there's a lot of support resources out there. And I think for the long term, whether you're individual or a business, you really need to, if you're individual, the networking, joining a business association, a club, those things help. But if you're an SME, the government has, for example, and most people don't know this, so I really like to talk about this. There is something called the Go Digital Grant. I think the Minister of Finance announced it some months ago, and the press has picked it up. But I don't know if people are really aware of the fact that there's Go Digital Grant of $200,000 to allow you to make your business more digital.
All right.
This is a grant, so you have to repay.
Okay. But I'm going to actually stick up in, because we have another banker. We have Jerome Smalling coming in, and let me bring him on. Oh my gosh. Okay. So first of all, let me welcome you anyway. So we have Jerome Smalling, and he's here with us. He is the head of the Jamaica Bankers Association. So Jerome, all alone by himself, has all the money in the country, the president. Yeah, see, he hears me. He hears me. Okay, so we're talking.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Yes. You can?
I heard you.
Okay,
we hear you.
Let's go.
Okay, great. All right, fantastic. So, Jerome, we're talking about the process of, personal debt management, bringing in the dignity, bringing in the language. So there's some banking language that persons need to be clear of. We talked about collateral. We talked about cash flow. So those are the banking language, which may be intimidating. And so we got on the topic of building a relationship with your banker so that your banker can be your champion in case there is a debt crisis. So being the head of all the bankers in the country, can you endorse or give us some more guidance?
Well, I think it's an excellent topic for us to be addressing to start. Unfortunately, I'm not the head of all the bankers. I'm just head of an association. Certainly, I'd like to be in charge of Mariame, but I'm not as qualified as I ought to be.
Anyway.
But anyways, I think it's a very important topic because we've spoken about financial literacy And a part of financial literacy is not only getting the public to understand how bankers speak or what we mean by each thing, but also for bankers who are sometimes highly trained to understand the client as well, so that
Right.
we establish a certain meeting point where we're speaking the same language. So
Absolutely.
our view of financial literacy is not one way, so to speak. It's really, trying to understand. And I can share an example of many moons ago as a young banker in St. Elizabeth. They had a number of operators who their primary business was basically taking from their farm or purchasing food and delivering to the hotel. They were referred to as food purveyors. And I remember a banker asking them all the time about operating um, cash operating limit and what they needed for their business, and using very complicated terms. And what we were really asking is what they call, for example, a load money. They say, look, every Friday I need $20,000, my load money, to load up my van, and I'll drive down to Negril or Montego Bay, sell to the hotel for $80,000. And those are very basic terms that they understood. But when you applied conventional banking or accounting terms, there's a serious disconnect between the
Right.
bankers
Right.
and and it was very interesting to learn, that your loan money is the same as what is the revolving requirement from a capital perspective. What do you need? And so I think first of all we have to address, to your point, that whole language barrier between bankers and the clients. Uh,
Yeah.
so I agree as well that the clients and bankers need to pay attention to the relationship. We need to understand that once you're sitting on this side of the desk, the client assumes that we have all the information required
Yes.
and that we are superior in knowledge as it relates to whatever their issue is. Uh, in many cases, it is so, but also we have to get that client to understand that the best solution is based on the information that they are providing us with. So if
Yes.
we are unaware of their unique situation, we may try to give them a cookie cutter solution when in fact we ought to be customizing the solution. So that transfer of information both ways
Yes.
would be extremely important. So I
Well,
encourage clients,
yeah.
give your banker the information.
Yeah, and I want to just take this opportunity to plug what's coming up in July, which is our Credit Restoration and Consumer Debt Solutions Virtual Summit, July 22 and 23. We will be bringing in various players in the debt world. We're looking at the Office of Insolvency, which is the nice word for bankruptcy. We're going to be bringing in some attorneys to talk about the foreclosure process. Of course, the bankers will be in talking about how consumers can take control of their debt. We'll have the government side. So we're going to have a holistic approach to debt on those 2 days. And why? Because in the same way we had to, President, I love calling a woman president, President Robinson said that we're dealing with three crises: the health, the human, and of course, the financial impact. Now, I know, Jerome, that your time with us is limited. So I just wanted, if you had any gems you wanted to drop in terms of just that long term debt management strategy and a short term debt management strategy from your perspective. Because you're
Well,
also president. It's just that, gender equality. But go
not as big a president as Mariam.
on.
Anyway, I'd say understand that if you are able to manage your debt, so an individual has a balance sheet just like a business. So you have your
Yes,
assets and your liabilities, and your ability to manage your borrowing to the extent
yes,
that you increase your asset base, whether it's earning assets, as in the case of an investment property, or just something you wish to enjoy, like your car or your house, we have to, as bankers and as individuals, we have to do enough research to be able to understand how we can manage our debt in an effective way. Now, the important thing as well is to understand what your exit plan is. How do
Mm.
you exit in the event of a crisis? Now,
Yes.
in my experience, many times we lose our jobs, we're unable to service our mortgage, we're also unable to maintain the property. Instead of taking the harsh decision up front to part with a property that you may have emotional connection with as well, we allow it to fester and the property to become rundown to the extent that when the banker takes the decision to dispose of the property, we are not in as good a position as we could have been had we
Yes.
taken that early decision.
Yes.
Other
Yes.
thing I'd say about managing debt and the positive part of managing debt is that if we are able to understand how we can use debt to improve our future. So, for example, if I'm a 50-year-old person and I have home equity, well, first of all, if I were to visit my investment banker or my investment advisor, and I would and I said, look, tell me how much money I need to start to save today to be in a position to retire happily. And the thing is, if you want, I mean, from a purist perspective, if you want to have the same income you have now when you retire, you're going to have to save 100% of your income starting today to put yourself in
Oh
a
boy.
position.
Yeah.
So it's
Okay.
always a daunting position. But if you have assets and you can extract the value from that asset, let's say I'm working until I'm 50, I'm working until I'm 65, I'm in a stable job, and I am able to extract the value, my home equity value, and invest that while I repay my and potentially invest it in a currency that I'm more comfortable with. I'm not
Right.
investing anything, but potentially, and I pay my loan while I'm still working. I may
Right.
well have a very nice investment amount for retirement, and I still have my property to potentially
Right.
dispose of or to again take a home equity. So that's part of understanding how debt can be very positive in planning your individual balance sheet.
And we come back to what President Robinson says, which is having your banker as your champion, building that relationship. And now you have added that financial literacy is a two-way street. So the bankers need to know what the consumers, the language that they're speaking, and then the consumers need to know. And I really believe that this is a call for almost a new profession, credit restoration professional, whose job it is, because the bankers are not counselors. Let's be very honest. And so to support the bankers, this new profession. Now, President Smalley, I know that you're going to be leaving us soon, but I'd like to bring in Jason Hensel. And Miriam, I'd like you to start. You wanted to talk about the SME side of this debt crisis and how to manage it effectively. So, Jerome, before you leave, if you want to give a few words as well, but I'd like to welcome Jason Hensel. And are you here in Kingston or are you in the awesome part of St. Elizabeth in Treasure Beach? I don't know.
I,
Where are
I'm in I'm in Treasure Beach, St. Elizabeth, and it's
you?
funny because I've known Jerome for a while, but I never when he mentioned being a young banker in St. Elizabeth, I was like, wow, okay. Are you from St. Elizabeth, Jerome?
No, no. I went to school in St. Elizabeth, but I worked in St. Elizabeth for about 7 months at Junction Scotiabank.
Okay, okay.
Oh, yes.
Well,
And so Jason Hensel he is the owner and proprietor of the coolest, the most awesome hotel on the South Coast, which is Jake's. He is on the executive of PSOJ, as is Miriam and Jerome. And I don't know, before you jump off of this StreamYard, you're gonna tell us if COVID has changed the whole scene on the South Coast for the better. I'm hoping, because you guys have so many experiences to offer persons who visit. So we're now going to talk about SMEs, small businesses, medium businesses, other enterprises. How have they coped in COVID? What tips do you offer them? So, Jason, we put the spotlight on you first.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on the program.
Yes.
You know, when COVID first happened, of course, we were just all completely blindsided. And one of the things I did is I did a lot of research on the 1918 pandemic. And when I saw that it was a 2-year period, I think in my mind, I said, okay, this could be 2 years. And I think that that was a very hard thing to accept. But I think, you know, you had to kind of look at a long, medium, and short-term strategy. And being in the hotel business, most hotels, if not every single one of them, operate on deposits for forward bookings, right? So it's a bit of a slippery slope, and it's quite dangerous because every single person who has booked a holiday from you, whether it's next week or in 2 years' time, they were fully within their rights to say, we can't come, the borders are closed, we need our money back, right? And that would have put us in an incredibly bad situation, right? So thank goodness, a lot of those forward bookings were persons who had come to Jake's before, sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 times before. And what we were able to do is reach out to them and say, look, we're going to offer you 18 months to rebook, an 18-month window. And the truth is, if someone even wanted 2 years, we would have given it to them. We said, you know, we know that the world has shifted, the floor has fallen out from under us. But what we really want is for you to stick with us and not ask for your money back, right? And I'm proud to say, and I'm very proud to say, that of 100% of the forward bookings, we were able to retain 70%. Okay. And only have to return 30%. And I think that was a team effort, and that was really appealing to persons because, as you said earlier, it's a two-way street, right? It's the same. It's as though we're the banker in this case, and the traveler is the customer, right? And we really had to appeal to them and show some level of empathy on both sides, right? Yeah. Because we were saying basically, you know, we're going to be here when this is done. We want you to come back to Jake's. We want you to remain a loyal customer. We're going to take care of you. We'll never forget this, right? Yes. And I'll be honest with you, there was one pretty emotional period for me when a guest called me. This was about a month into the pandemic, and he said, Jason, how many staff you have? I said, 150. He said, here's my credit card information. I want you to give every single one of them $100 US.
Wow.
And let me tell you, I was in a state, okay?
Wow.
And then another guest of ours reached out to us and said she wanted to start a GoFundMe. And that raised $70,000 US for a staff. Now, for a small hotel of our size, I think it just spoke volumes, you know? So we did have to let staff go during that period of total shutdown. You know, we had to look at our cash flow, which was non-existent. But early on in the game, I'm a big one about effective communication. And I said, you know, the worst thing to do is to try and hide, right? So let's call every single one of our creditors. The same way we were asking our customers to stay with us is the same way now we need to go to our creditors and say, look, this is the scenario. We're going to be good for it. Stick with us. Let us work out some type of a payment schedule. And this included the government for taxes and payroll taxes. This included suppliers like Grace Kennedy, Caribbean Producers, Wisinco, people who have had a relationship since we started in 1993. So we were very honest with them. And then I remember speaking to our banker about the situation. And, you know, over the years, we have taken a community-based approach. And in the good times, when we had money, what we did is we bought land. So we created a land bank. And I looked at that land as like, you know, if everything went fantastically great, we would develop it ourselves. If it went somewhere in the middle, we would sell some and keep some. And if everything for some reason went really bad, we would be able to sell the land. So one of the good things that happened during the pandemic is that a lot of Kingstonians, particularly Kingstonians, started to come to Treasure Beach because, you know, they couldn't travel and they'd already been to Ochi and Montego Bay and Negril and all these places, Port Antonio. So like, you know what, all right, I've been hearing about Treasure Beach for a long time. Let me go and check it out. And a lot of those Kingstonians, quite frankly, are the ones who carried us through this period, the local.
Wow.
And the good news is that they inquired about land for sale. And we had to sell 3 pieces of land, or we decided to sell 3 pieces of land. Quite honestly, our bank told us that we were not there yet. That was the language that they used. They said, you know, I don't want you to panic. I don't want you to think that you have to start selling assets. But I am my level of risk tolerance is you know, fairly low. Everyone has a different level of risk that they're comfortable with, and I wanted to be able to sleep well at night. So even though my bank said we're not there yet, I didn't want to get there, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, with persons coming down from Kingston and asking if land was for sale, I was like, you know what? Yes, land is for sale. And we ended up selling, you know, 3 pieces of land and just creating a cushion where we could pay off our creditors very slowly. You know, look at every single line item, just monitor how our deposits were being drawn down on. So it was like a lot of balls in the air at the same time.
Yeah. And I want to just jump in, Jason, and say you're pulling from what Mariame and Jerome have been saying. So number one, you had a purpose for you know, buying the land or any of the loans you had. You had your banker as your champion. Jerome, you know, he says take emotions out of the decision and sell if you need to. Jerome also talks about building up assets that will carry you through a particular period. So really, really good gems. You're living what they're talking about. I don't know if Mariame, you want to jump in and say anything?
Yeah, I think Jason's story is a very practical story about how to think about the future. And it says that even if you're an entrepreneur, it's okay to do scenario planning and to say the what ifs. And with the what ifs, you take actions to create that cushion. Because I think if anything we should take away, if we don't take anything else away from this pandemic, the Black Swan event, the impossible 1% has happened. So we always have this perception of business owners and entrepreneurs as people who push all the way to the limit and they take risks and they're very like, you know, flamboyant in how they see the world and highly, you know, optimistic. And I think it's just a very practical example of how to run a sustainable business. Jason, I can remember when you started your business. I'm sure it's
1993.
Yeah, so it's multi-decades. So to have a sustainable business, this way of constantly planning for the future and being okay to sell land, which is, you think you want to hoard your assets, but it gives you cash flow that you can build up and withstand the shock. Yeah. So it's an excellent example.
And Jerome, I'm not sure if this is an invitation for you to return to St. Elizabeth. I don't know. But before you answer, we have the amazing Gloria Henry in the waiting room. We're going to bring her in. And again, another president of the BPO Association of Jamaica. Welcome, Mrs. Henry. So now we're going to give Jerome a chance to tell us if he's going back to St. Elizabeth.
Let me start by congratulating Jason on the write-up he had today that was shared in our group. Congratulations for a small hotel in Treasury. Started what? Just in 1993. I mean, kudos to you. That's I'm very proud of you, sir.
Thank you very much.
The thing I'd say though is what he has highlighted is the whole idea of so in our previous live, Dennise, we spoke about, and I was delivering courses on investment, and
Yes.
I used to start by saying, look, a lot of the things that we speak about in investment, or grandparents used to tell us, they didn't use the same language. But what Jason has highlighted is saving for a rainy day or preparing for a rainy day. So it's really about identifying when is rainy day and do I pull the trigger now? Do I act now? Because he would have created his cushion to take him through that rainy period, so to speak. And to your point, it's an excellent example of how a business, and Mariam would have indicated as well, how a business sets itself up for sustained growth and sustaining itself over many decades. So it's very good, Jason, and congrats again on your write-up.
All right,
fantastic. You should tell him where the write-up was, though, Jerome.
You go ahead, Jason. Don't
Is it the Wall Street Journal or something?
The Wall Street Journal.
Which is
Oh,
big.
yeah, wow. Congratulations. You know, and this is, you know, the thing is financial literacy. And I think that's the defining position. And I know that Mrs. Henry, as president of the BPO Association, is very, very, very passionate about financial literacy because a lot of her stakeholders are young people. And their view of money, and I'm sure it's going to be very shaped by this pandemic. So, Mrs. Henry, I want to, President Henry, I want to put you on the spotlight to just really share your views on the importance of financial literacy in managing debt, and maybe how bankers can talk more, to young people. I know Jerome is really good with the young people because he himself is very young, so he talks their language. He's on TikTok and all of that. So, Mrs. Henry. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah. I just realized that I'm on mute. Okay, so Thank you very much, Dennise, for the opportunity to join these esteemed bankers and the celebrity hotel owner, Jason, this platform. I'm happy that you're having these discussions because I think it's very timely. As you've said, that I'm part of a sector that employs a lot of young people, average age about 22, 23.
Mm-hmm.
And I see how, some of them, the way that they don't manage their monies, they get paid on Friday and they're looking to borrow on Monday. And it's not about how much they earn, because some of them really do earn very good monies, good commissions. And you will hear the conversation that, boy, I'm earning a 10 and a 20 grand this week, because I'm going to a party wherever. And the whole consumption way, that the consumption nature, it's just a matter of spending as much as you earn. And I have been, for the longest time, been talking with bankers within our network that, they need to come up with a product, some kind of product that will entice these young people to save and to get them to be more conscientious and manage their monies. For them to understand that money is a tool, and that if you don't use it wisely, it will leave you. And for them to be more conscientious in their financial planning, to be more prudent in how they spend. We brought in some banks that have spoken with different companies, and the companies themselves also bring in financial institutions to share information on financial literacy. But I think that it needs to be more widespread in educating and really shaping mindset about spending and budgeting. And to stay out of debt as well, because a lot of the debts that they get into are these high cost payday loans that really drain their resources. So I think there's great opportunity there. When I was raising my child, she's an adult now, but at 5 years old, I remember stumbling over about 20 something dollars in the house. And I was like, oh my God, why do we have so many of these? And, her dad and I, we talked about it, and we started getting shares and so on for gifts instead of toys. And so by the time she got to university, I mean, she was having several shares in different companies. And by the time she graduated, she was very conscientious. She was very knowledgeable about the stock market and investing. She was looking to buy her own shares. She was looking at IPOs, and she was looking at investing. And she just recently this year started working. And the first thing she's thinking about is acquiring assets, buying a house. She doesn't have to pay rent now, but she's looking at buying a house. So it's important that you start early. And I would encourage parents to help their children to understand the value of money, and to understand how, they plan for the future, that, it's a strategy, and they have to really plan. It doesn't happen by chance. So sometimes parents really just, everything that the children ask for, they give it to them without them seeing the value and understanding the value and why and how much it costs. We also want to encourage persons to, look at the way they use credit, because Jamaica is now using more credit cards than way before. I mean, Mariame can talk about this, but I know that, over the last few years, there has been significant growth in the ownership of credit card facilities. And many persons just see this as an opportunity to spend. And I tell my family members that, look, your credit card, treat it as a salary advance that you pay back at the end of the month, right? And not as a debt. And that way, you don't end up with these high credit card debts that you can't repay.
Yes.
So those are some of the things that I believe that we should share with our young people, help them to understand how to budget, help them to understand that, you're see money as a tool, that you have to plan for it, that you have to have a current plan and a future plan, that you have to set goals, financial goals for yourself, that you should create a nest egg, and I hear Jason talking about that land bank and how, it came in handy to cushion the business during these difficult times of the pandemic. And it's the same way you treat your personal finances. You must have a nest egg set up somewhere. And it doesn't matter how little you earn or how much, you really should put aside something that you don't touch. Only the absolute emergency, right? So you put that aside, you don't touch it, you don't handle it, and you allow it to stay there. And of course, only in the absolute emergency should you really touch that money.
But Jerome, I want to put the spotlight on you, Jerome, as president of the Bankers Association. Again, we made a joke about TikTok, but is it something extreme like that will get to the young people? Because if there's a credit crisis or a debt crisis when I'm in my 20s, that behavior may follow me to my 40s, 50s, and 60s. And then I come to you, Jerome, I don't have a pension. I don't, because I didn't even learn how to manage debt. So I'm not telling you to go on TikTok and sing and dance, but I am saying that, President Henry, she really has a point. We got to bend the tree when it's young so that young persons are aware. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, or you guys have a I don't know if you have an Instagram, Facebook competition. I don't know. I don't know if you're an influencer yet, Jerome.
Well, I think Mariam and team will take the mantle in that regard. I believe I'm actually in my last few days as president. However, I think some of the key takeaways though would be, or some of the things that would keep me awake would be, so the president indicated how she would
Oh,
have
which
been,
one? We have so many of the.
how she would have been able to create that environment for her daughter.
Oh,
Unfortunately,
President Henry. All right.
yes,
Yes.
President Henry, who is a
Yes.
colleague as well, I believe, for the Ports Authority. But anyways, the the challenge and what keeps me awake is the fact that not maybe less than half of our young population would have that environment or would have the guidance of parents who are able to guide them and kind of take them through the process that President Henry spoke about earlier. And so I believe our association, I believe generally we have to step in and try to fill that void, kind of create that financial guidance for young persons. I read an article last week, which I shared with my daughter as well, how students who are well, the millennials, the oldest of which would turn 40 today, sorry, this year, and they're under debt, significant debt for
Yes.
student loan. They've been unable to pay off their student loan, and so they're struggling in terms of moving to the next phase. They're 40, they should be moving towards, based on the neoclassical understanding of life stages, they should be moving towards asset accumulating and stuff. So I believe the onus is on us to try and fill that void where the parents are not necessarily there, or the children are not necessarily, or young adults exposed to an environment wherein they can receive the solid guidance that President Henry spoke of. But understand as well that as I said before, you didn't know, right? I know as adults, as we grow older, we get more experience and our knowledge base increases. So it's really trying to bridge that gap between a young person wanting to enjoy and to be young and to be around the
Yes.
things that people tend to do when they're young, but balancing it with what they will face as they move towards the future.
Yes, yes, yes. And I wanted to ask Jason also. I wanted to ask you in terms of, because we're on about financial literacy, and so we're talking about young people and really getting them in the spotlight. But in your industry, tourism employs a gamut of educational levels. How can, again, because a lot of persons, from the PhD to the high school dropout, they borrow to live. So sometimes that becomes an HR issue. I don't know if you have any comments to share with this panel about that, because we're looking at young people, but we also want adults who are vulnerable to be considered.
Right. Okay. So 100% of our staff are local, are from this area. And that's something we're very, very proud of. And we've put a tremendous amount of time, energy, and investment into training these staff, these team members, and in exposing them. And a lot of them have done online courses. We have an excellent person in HR, or HR manager. And we meet every Monday, and we talk about the week that's gone by, the week that's coming. We plan, we break out into working groups. So in my mind, it's not necessarily, the hospitality industry is not necessarily about your level of education per se, but more your spirit, your willingness, how you approach service in a proud way as opposed to a subservient way, how to lift your head high, and I think because of the investment we've made in that, it has paid off. Our general manager is a graduate of Stets High School, and then she went on to Hart and learned hospitality in Hart. Colleen Powell, a young lady. She started in reservations. She started in waitressing, went through reservations, went through all the different departments, and she's doing a phenomenal job. as chairman of Newell High School, which is just down the road, and Newell is where you end up. It's at the lowest. It's the lowest tier of academic performance, and our challenge there is that I think 70% of our students are on the PATH program, right? And as Jerome said earlier, it's about it's that lack of having the structure and the mentorship that Miss Gloria Henry spoke about earlier. Someone to show you how you need to plan ahead. As opposed to wanting a fancy new car, why don't you pay down on a piece of land that's going to appreciate, as opposed to the car which is going to depreciate. So we have lost 70% of the student population at Newell. It started out at 90%, and then every month it's just gone down and down, and it's heartbreaking.
When you say lost, what do you mean by lost?
We literally cannot. Nobody will pick up the phone at the other end. Not a parent, not a guardian, not the child. And it's heartbreaking because we know that this is going to have ripple effects, And in my mind, I see skills training as a massive opportunity because not everyone learns in the classroom. But if you find out what someone is interested in using their hands doing, whether it's new techniques in farming, agriculture, but the average kid, the average student at Newell, unfortunately, particularly the males, they want to go and plant a high value short-term crop, usually ganja, right? And they want to buy a motorbike, and they want to have a cell phone, and they want to have 2 or 3 girlfriends. That is what they aspire to. That's their, and what we need to do is, a lot of them come from broken homes. Parents themselves may not know how to read and write. They're on the PATH program. It's difficult. It's difficult. And, we need to understand, just like how we're facing the economic realities of the pandemic, we need to understand what the fallout is going to be. And as a nation, how can we come to the rescue of that? So we've started a skills training program with, and we've captured some persons there. But there's a lot more that we need to do, because I'm concerned about the fallout of our youngsters that don't have the support of a Gloria Henry.
Yes.
That is really where my and it's not as though fishing and farming isn't giving the level of returns that it used to, like say in Treasure Beach in generations gone by, right? Because a lot of our fish is now imported, a lot of our food is now imported. It's almost as though you can only scratch out a living there. And I see my role as not someone in a leadership role of community development in my community, in my parish, in my nation. And we have, even though we're going to come out of this, I think relatively good in terms of economically, and thank God on the highest level we had a Minister of Finance who understood this, and thank God we had a cushion there. He had done some divestments before, but the social fallout and the psychological fallout is something that we need to put firmly on the table and prepare for. That's not a dollars and cents thing, but more of how can we inspire these persons.
So, President Robinson, I want to jump in because in some cases, you, the banker, and even Jerome, if you want to jump in here, you're almost, a little bit like a social worker, because, President Henry and Jason, when they're laying out these social issues, this impacts not just the loans you make, but the collections. So I don't know if you want to share any, ideas about what's different in COVID than would have been maybe you would have taken or actions we have taken 5 years ago. So Mariame, I don't know if you want to answer that question first. Are you with us? Are you frozen? I think she's frozen. Jerome? Persons are frozen. Oh, Jerome, you're back. Okay. Mariame, you're back. Okay, you guys were frozen for a minute. Did you hear the question? So the question was, compared to this COVID period, comparing it to say 5 years ago, when you are listening to these social challenges, young people who have no financial literacy, or in the case, Jason is sharing, young people who have just opted out of the school system. What are you doing differently now than you would have done 5 years ago as bankers dealing with these social issues? Oh boy, have I lost? Jerome, you're back?
No, I'm here.
Okay, great.
Yeah. I was waiting.
What's the difference between now and 5 years ago for you in hearing these social issues?
Well, to be honest, the social issues have been compounded, so to speak, by the pandemic. Jason spoke about the school that he chairs, and the fact that you have tiers in our education system. And Jason, I attended the City on the Hill, which they would say, okay, that's a cream. I believe it's your school as well. But the fact is, we still have a tiered system where we have individuals who are we have a greater expectation. They have a greater opportunity of being successful relative to the newels, of course. So how can we establish or create a more level playing field that we can bring more persons into the net? Now, this has been compounded by the pandemic, and Jason spoke about the number of students who have fallen through the crack. Now, when you look at the big schools with the alumni associations, they were able to rally and to have old boys association, past students association, support in providing the resources required to keep most of those students engaged during the period. When you look at schools that do not necessarily have that support, you're talking about a huge gap in terms of that. Now, how do we ensure that the path to growth that we were on, which will require highly skilled, highly trained individuals for the future, how do we ensure that banks will have clients in the future? And how do we ensure that we are doing right by our population? And those are the things that I believe corporate Jamaica will continue to focus on and will focus on. Specific to the banking sector, with the impact of COVID, we have seen, fortunately for us, the banking sector, with the support of the Minister of Finance and the Bank of Jamaica, would have taken early action to prevent the fallout in the sector, to the extent that the economic impact on the sector would not be as great. Is there a business requirement as it relates to social intervention? Absolutely. The JMB group for a period ran a program which focused on the social aspect of and it's Conversations for Greatness. It's really around how do we engage those in the school system who aren't as fortunate, who aren't benefiting from stable homes or very strong alumni associations. And I believe corporate Jamaica, even more so, and listening to the statistics that Jason would have outlined, we had to get involved in the process and to support as much as we can. Mariame is back. Mariame, I tried to answer your question.
I couldn't hear anything. What was the question? Sorry, I'm sure you did a great job.
Yes. So So we're looking at bankers as, you know, in a small, tiny way, social workers, in that here is the situation. You know, President Henry, she has a body of young people who are living for today. And you know, she's really working to find a way to get the message of fiscal responsibility and financial literacy to them. And then you have Jason, who shared with us, you know, a 70% drop off in attendance in the school he's a chairman of. This does impact bankers, you know, in terms of the quality of loans, in terms of repayments. But what's different between now in COVID and 5 years ago as a banker? How is it different for you?
Yeah, I think I'm not even sure if I think of it as COVID, but I think banking has evolved. I think I don't think banks can think of themselves just as, you know, how we've traditionally done business. I actually think we're really a consumer products and services company offering banking. So our ability to really talk to our customers and explain what we need, and what we're looking for from them, and partnering with them and using that right language, I think is more important now than ever, especially as we move to a higher compliance environment where we don't want to sacrifice customer experience. I actually think there are two things that young people should learn in high school or maybe even primary or prep school. One, how to manage your money. It's something I don't recall being taught in school at all. And it's actually one of the root causes of most problems in relationships, households, work, etc. And the second thing is obviously integrity. I think the first class I took on integrity was in business school in my late 20s. So I actually think those two topics are things that we should demystify and be comfortable talking about, so that by the time they get into the banking ecosystem, it's much easier for them to interact effectively with banks. So, and I fully agree with what Jerome said at the end. I caught the end where he was talking about what JMMB was doing in terms of conversations with children or with youth. I think the more we can speak to our youth and demystify things, the better, because with social media taking on its powerful role now than even 5 years ago, there's a lot of information out there in the public space. And as bankers and as financiers, it's very important for us to be able to dissect what is really true, necessary, important, versus what is just noise. So that's another thing I would say that's pretty different. The last thing I'll just comment on is this idea about taking out loans to go to carnival, which I'm a big carnival person, so I get it. But this idea about taking out loans for this near-term gratification, again, you know, as bankers, I think it's not just the banks. I think as business leaders, it's important for us to be able to have those types of conversations, not just with our kids and our kids' friends, but with the youth, with the young persons in our company, without seeming like preachers, because you know they think of us as old and like preachy.
Yes, yes.
Find a way to communicate with them to ensure that they don't make these types of mistakes. We had a seminar the other day about pension and investing, something my parents have always talked to me about because I watch how they are now retired. I hope I can be like that when I'm their age. But it's amazing how much information or under information we have. And I think as business leaders, as bankers, et cetera, the responsibility lies with us to share the most important, to sift through the noise and share the most important information with our youth.
All right. Well, we want to welcome Jeffrey Hall. I'm not sure if he's hearing us. Yes. All right. So now, you know, we're streaming live on social media, and we're streaming live on the Public Broadcasting Corporation of Jamaica. We're doing all of this to talk about debt, managing debt in a crisis. And, you know, Mr. Hall is, wow, there's just so many titles. He's chairman of Scotiabank Jamaica. He's very branded with Jamaica producers right now because he's a high-level farmer. Is that a good title? If you're a high-level farmer.
Small farmer.
You're a small farmer. All right. And he's very branded with Jamaica producers. And I think you have a little, you know, interest in shipping, you know, just a tiny bit. A small little boat. Yes. And so in your capacity in finance, agriculture, logistics, you talk to a lot of people. I hope you're not a shy introvert, because you have to talk to a lot of people to run your business. So you'd have a really good pulse on what's happening. What's different in this COVID period in terms of debt management, and how are businesses coping, from your neighboring small farmers to your neighboring shipbuilders? How are we coping?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for having me and say hello to your panel. They're all my good friends.
Yes.
So it's good to be among friends. So, there's a sense in which COVID is different. And I'm seeing myself, by the way, and not seeing everybody else. Is there a way to...
Yes, I know. I just gave you a little solo so you could introduce, and I'll put you back on the panel. Is that okay?
It is okay. I feel better on the panel.
All right.
Okay,
I'll move you right back into the panel. All right. There you go. You're back.
Okay. So there's a sense in which COVID is different, and I think everybody has mentioned it. But there's a sense in which, particularly as an insight for people who are younger than I am, there's a sense in which COVID is not that different.
Okay.
So my career in Jamaica started out at FinSAC in 1998, 97, 98, when the financial services sector of Jamaica collapsed. And we had to figure out as Jamaican people what that meant for us. And in my job at the front lines of FinSAC, I had grown so-called business leaders, but they were business leaders, in my office as a 28-year-old, crying about extraordinarily high debt, about businesses failing, about debt challenges. My first full year as CEO of Jamaica Producers Group was in 2008, in the financial meltdown that took place then, 10 years later, in a situation in which our revenues collapsed. And we had every single business that we owned was on fire, either because of 2008 or because, as you mentioned, in reference to small farmers, we had adverse weather conditions. In our case, we had our business destroyed by Ivan, Dean, Dennis, Emily, Gustav. Remember them well. So here we are again in COVID. So for my sense, as a business person, I guess I have to assume that events like this will happen. I have to plan in advance for them. And that's part of the insight. But there's a lot more.
Okay. So tell me the more.
You want more? Yeah. So I reflected a little bit on what Mariame just said about kind of, okay, so you're going to have these crises every now and then, and just narrowly from the perspective of money management, how do you think about them? And she said, oh gosh, I wish our school system had thought about this. And one of the things that I think is the most important lesson for everybody listening is to understand compound interest. And my children are tired of hearing me talk about it. And everybody that's young that I know is tired of hearing me talk about it. But let me just illustrate for you the business of compound interest. And this is just a mathematical statement. I'm not talking about principles and right and wrong and the equity, just the mathematics. So if you have a young person that borrows $5 million from Mariame, right, at the beginning of their career, and they choose to use debt, and they borrow it at 7%, kind of rates that you see for a home mortgage, etc. And they work from age 21 to age 65, okay? So the question is, for the average young person, just to understand debt, how much money do you owe when you reach 65? So you borrow $5 million, how much money do you owe 44 years?
100 million. 100 million. 100 million.
That's so you know it.
Oh,
$100 million. It's exactly right. It's about $98 million. So you owe 20 times what you borrow. Now, what happens if instead of the interest rate that's charged, instead of it being 7%, the kind of rates that I hear some people talking about, it's, let's say, 21%, so 3 times, right? Still half the rate that you can get if you're accessing an unsecured microcredit loan. But, and maybe it's lower than the credit card rate in many institutions, but it's still a pretty high rate of interest, right? So it's 3 times. So I guess instead of it being 100 million, you owe what, 300 million, right?
No, you're gonna owe far more than 300 million.
400?
A billion.
Gloria?
1 billion.
You say 1 billion. What do you say, Jason?
Oh, Jason, put on your.
I'm not, boy, I don't know. 800 million.
800 million. Okay, Mariame. I take it over your show, Dennise.
Oh, Mariame, you're.
Sorry. Yes. Not sure.
Okay, not sure. No problem. So for everybody who's listening on this call who's 21, who's borrowing $5 million, and they're not paying the 7%, but they're paying 21%, at 65, you owe $22 billion.
Oy!
And that's exactly why the grown men were crying when I was working at FinTech. Because that simple mathematical lesson about compounding and the fact that there's a exponential function on the end of that and that the graph goes like that was not well understood. And it's extremely important to understand it. So, okay, for many of us, so in my life, I kind of experienced this crisis early on in my career. And so if you can pull a lever, choose to experience your financial crises very early on, right? So you can recover. So from where I sit, going into this current crisis, I feel relatively armed. But for those who aren't or didn't perceive themselves relatively well armed, you still have some choices, okay? And that's really important to talk about. So here you are today, you're in debt. What I think, and this is true whether you're talking about small business or your personal life or big business, okay? The second kind of big insight that I have is you've got to focus on what is important. And you got to stop doing what's not important. And you got to spend the time to know the difference. Okay? And that's in our personal lives or in our professional lives.
Well, that's mystical. Let's get some practical. We're in a room of business and bankers. Give us a checklist.
So you're not interested in the kind of spiritual side of it. You want to know.
Oh, of course. Yes, of course. We're all believers in this room. All of us.
Okay, so in terms of in the business world, they have a term for it, and Mariame knows this better than I do because I didn't go to business school. But they call it activity-based costing, right? That's how they describe knowing what's important and focusing what's important and stop doing what's not important. Okay, and you would use your personal life as well. Activity-based costing basically says something like this. It says 80% of what you're probably doing, what I would consider to be your core business, probably makes sense. And you're probably doing and spending 20% of your time doing something that's probably not a good idea. It's probably a bad idea. And in many businesses, it's an unprofitable idea. And it's unprofitable even if it might have a positive gross margin. But you're going to find that it's taking all of your time for your accounting department to collect your receivables because they're chasing down this last customer. You're going to find that it's the thing that's gumming up your bottling line if you're in manufacturing. You're going to find that it's the thing that's gumming up your working capital if you're in distribution. It's the thing that's sitting in the warehouse and not moving, and it's causing that interest rate clock to tick and to compound. Okay, so it's important for you to look at your business and understand what is in the 80% of the stuff that you really should be doing and what's in the 20% that you probably shouldn't be doing. And then now you've got to figure out how to get rid of that 20% in a sensible way, in a way that doesn't compromise your business, and ideally in a way that allows you to bring down that debt and stop that clock from compounding. And that can be, in a very complex environment like FinSac, there's a lot of structuring that happens. There's an insolvency arrangement that you can look into. There's a restructuring. There's all sorts of ways to manage that separation from this kind of bad stuff, to rip off that Band-Aid. But the principle of identifying what you ought to stop doing and stop doing it is critical in your personal, your professional, and your commercial life.
Wow.
So I said,
so you're saying, yes, you're saying when we're looking at managing a debt crisis, figure out what you shouldn't be doing and then stop doing it. I like that. Ms. Henry, President Henry, for the young people in the BPO sector, how would they implement Jeffrey Hall's recommendation? I mean, what are they doing that they need to stop doing that's giving them this horrific $22 billion bill that'll come due in a couple decades? You know, what would you say, President Henry?
Well, one of the things that I would encourage them to do is exactly what Mariame said, that don't take loans to do things for fun. That will not provide any gains in the future. Don't borrow monies, you know, for things like parties or to get married. Some people borrow money for big weddings or vacation, to take vacation. Look at, if you're borrowing, borrow for something that is going to derive a return for you in, you know, tangible assets. If you already are in debt, which some people definitely are, look now at loan consolidation, credit card debts probably. Try find a lower interest rate facility that can pay off those high interest credit card loans. Look for, if you already have properties that you've borrowed and you have challenges paying those debts, you know, go in and talk to your banker, be proactive. Don't wait until the bank steps in and tries to, you know, sell off your assets. But you take the proactive approach and do as I would do. If I don't get through to the bank, then I will take it up with the BOJ. And I mean, I know the BOJ can't force a bank to do anything, but at least you show them that you are aggressive and you are serious about getting some action from them.
Yes.
And going with a strategy to your bank. Don't wait on the bank to tell you what they're gonna do. You tell them what is best for you.
And I just want to jump in because and plug that our credit restoration virtual summit coming up in July, we will be looking at a lot of these 8 options that persons have in dealing with their bank. So we're getting perspectives in this conversation, but there are actual things that you can do, and we will explore them more in detail in July. But back to Jeffrey, are you Director Hall, Chairman Hall? I mean, everybody has a title. What's your favorite title? Or
you got it right the first time. It's Jeffrey.
Jeffrey, all right, yeah. Jeffrey. Okay, Jeffrey. Now, as a small farmer, so we have Jason from St. Elizabeth. We have Jerome, who might be moving back to St. Elizabeth. In terms of your farm, because we looked at young people, we've looked at business people. Jason has shared that the agriculture sector has changed because we have a lot of imports. But you, Jeffrey, who's very big on exports now, what would you say to persons in the agricultural sector who have, some challenges in this COVID period and they don't want Jerome or Mariame calling them directly to collect? As a small farmer, what would you say, Jeffrey?
Well, I would say that I'd say a couple of things. So if you're already in the business of farming, obviously you want to look at the cheapest place to finance your business. And you want to be able to ensure that your suppliers can participate in your financing arrangements.
Okay.
Because that's going to be one of your cheapest sources of financing. And that's going to require you to pay attention to how you treat them, to how you work with them, and make sure that you are perceived by them to be creditworthy. And then you're going to want to make sure that your customers pay you on time. And you're going to want to make sure that you choose your customer base wisely. And you choose customers and you audit your customers and you review your customers' creditworthiness so you don't get caught. And that you're on top of it and you pull the money in quickly. So getting that kind of accounts receivable and accounts payable under control before you find yourself running to the bank is an important part of it. The other thing I would say, is that, and Warren Buffett, who of course is a legendary investor, has this idea of not investing in things you don't understand. And agriculture is one of these things. There's agri, and then there's culture. You gotta kind of live it. The agriculture business. It's a business.
You have to live it.
You have to live it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you either are it or you're not.
Like the agri and the culture, and you have to live it. All right, all right.
So it's a business that I don't believe it allows, particularly as a small farmer, I don't believe it allows for absenteeism. I don't believe it allows for lax controls. It's a business you have to kind of live in. And so that would be an important part of advice. If you're not in agriculture and you're focusing on being a banker, and you want to be a banker for the rest of your life, and I don't know, I wasn't on the call if Jerome was saying he was going to be a farmer or something as well as being a banker.
Yeah.
But if you're not yet a farmer and you plan to be one, plan to do it all day long.
Okay. Okay. Wow. This has been amazing. Really amazing. I want to thank all of the busy bankers and business people who came on. This has been amazing. And I want to thank, the PSOJ, the private sector organization of Jamaica, for pulling all of these busy people together. And, I trust that this time you spent with us, Jeffrey, was part of the 80% that needed to be done. I really am going to say that. And I just, and Jason, having stepped away from being interviewed by Wall Street Journal to here, thank you for taking the time. Jerome, you busy. You're in charge of all the banks in the whole Jamaica. So
it's a big boss.
And Mariame, thank you. I know you're going to be one of our speakers in July, and I'm going to pull on everybody else to come back again in July. I just want to thank you all. President Henry, again, thank you. And we are about bringing dignity to the personal debt management conversation. We really believe that, I just want to wrap up saying, Jerome made an excellent point that financial literacy is a two-way street, in that the bankers have to speak the language and persons have to know what bankers need to see. So thank you all. And we will hopefully do this again in July. And I appreciate the time that you've taken. I'm Dennise Williams, also president of the Caribbean Credit Repair Association. And with all the presidents and chairmen and directors and everybody their big titles, we're just all people here. I think we're all helping professionals in our own way. And I really appreciate the time. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.